Are you afraid to modify your Toyota Tacoma? Don't be. This is how you get over that. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Robmotive. So the big question, are you afraid to modify your Toyota Tacoma? And here's how you get over it. You know, I got to admit, when I first jumped in about 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was, I had some fear that I might ruin my Toyota Tacoma, that I might be trying to tackle things that were beyond my ability. But nonetheless, I went ahead and jumped in, took the leap, and started doing things anyway. And I'm here to tell you, there is a way to get over that. You know, if you have that burning desire to personalize, customize your own truck, and do the work yourself, here's how you get over the fear. Start slowly and start easily. You know, with the Toyota Tacoma, there are so many things out there that you can do. You don't have to jump right into the more complicated things. There are lesser things that you can do to build confidence to get up to those more complicated things that you might want to do. For example, decals. Nothing's easier than decals. You just stick them on. Hopefully the only challenge is getting them level the way that you want. And that's it. And there are a ton of things that you can do out there. You know, even easier, I would start with just window decals, you know, for the front window, because window decals are the easiest ones to take off. You grab a razor blade, you hit the edge, you can just scrape it off, scrape off the adhesive, no issue. You're not going to scratch the windows. There's no problem with that. You just have to make sure that you don't go back and forth with the blade on the window. You always want to be at an angle. And don't smack the window. You don't want to chip or crack anything. But it'd be pretty difficult to do either one on glass. Next up, debadging. You know, debadging makes a heck of a difference to the appearance of the truck, and it's really pretty simple to do. Now, there are a couple of ways you can screw it up. You know, if you're trying to take something off and you're trying to cut through that adhesive, make sure that you're using something that's not abrasive. In other words, don't run out, grab a screwdriver, and start trying to scrape it off with that. That's not a good idea. Metal on paint is never a good idea. Matter of fact, when you're removing decals, badges, things like that, I wouldn't even use anything that's probably plastic. I always try to go with cloth. You know, a lot of people will use fishing line to kind of saw through the adhesive. Some people use dental floss. I've never understood how that works at all. I've never had any luck with dental floss. Every time I've tried to use it, it always breaks. Maybe I just didn't have the adhesive heated up enough, but it never works for me. I actually prefer some kind of thin cloth. It's soft, it's strong enough that it won't rip or tear, and even if it does, you just go to the next section of it and you can kind of saw through with that. Now, when I talk about heating up, some people will suggest to you, and I highly recommend you do not do this, but using a heating gun. Now, if you've ever had any experience with using a heating gun, then you know they get really, really hot. So hot that they can melt plastic. I mean, think what that would do to the finish on the paint on your Tacoma. You definitely don't want to use a heating gun unless you are so proficient at it that you're not going to have any issue. I would always use a hairdryer. And you know, if you don't have one, you know, I really don't have a need for one myself. Go out to Walmart or somewhere and pick up a cheap one. They don't cost that much money. And you don't need the best one out there. You just need one that will heat up a little bit. Soften up the glue, saw it off with something, pull the decal or the badge off, and then clean up the adhesive. Now, speaking of cleaning up the leftover adhesive, some people, a lot of people, I guess, recommend using one of those rubber wheels. You know, you attach it to your drill, and then it spins, of course, and then you put it up against the adhesive, which is on top of your paint, to get the adhesive off. That's another thing I would not recommend for a couple reasons. Number one, it's spinning. And the longer you hold that spinning wheel against your paint, the more heat is going to be produced. And the same thing is with the heating gun. The more heat that's produced, the more opportunity to damage your finish. I would not do it. The other thing is if anything abrasive gets embedded in that wheel, it's then like a sanding disc, right? It's spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour and it's got grit in it. You don't want to do that. It's not to say that people haven't had success with those. I know they have. I would not do it. I would use chemicals, heat, or just your thumb to roll that adhesive off. It works. I've done it 1,000,000 times myself, and there's no reason to take a chance. Now, it will take you a little bit longer. Obviously, if you're using a rubber wheel on a drill, it's going to remove everything quicker. You just don't want to remove your paint or clear coat along with it. Next up, bolt-on things. Tackle things that are bolt-ons, things that are intuitive when you put them on. A good example are side steps. If you want to put side steps on, if you look underneath the Tacoma, there are threaded holes down there that exist already. All you have to do is pull the little plug out of them. A lot of them have a little plug in them. It's kind of to protect the threads, I guess. Just pull those out. You have the exposed holes. If you're buying a good quality side step or even a skid bar or something, you can match them up. All the holes will match up to the product that you're buying and you just bolt it on. The only thing you have to worry about there is over tightening the bolts. And I bring that up because in my younger days, I used to do that all the time. I would get on those bolts and I would crank them as hard as I can. The problem is you're stronger than that bolt. I used to break them. Make sure you don't do that. Torque specs are good. Got to admit, I don't pay much attention to them with things like this, but if you're new and you're being very careful, get yourself a torque wrench. Torque it down to the spec that it requires, and then you're not going to break the heads off of those bolts and have other issues. Something a little bit more complicated, but still not difficult, lighting type things. Plug and play stuff, like the taillights. I have some tinted taillights on my truck. It's a plug and play application. It comes with a wiring harness that just plugs into the factory. You don't have to cut anything or splice anything or anything like that. It's very simple to do. If you want to go one notch up, tackle some fog lights for the front. You can do that. It's going to involve a little bit more splicing, but I would go with something like the wireless accessory controller. That just hooks up to your battery, on the terminals. It's very easy to do. And then you connect in your lighting, your accessory lighting to that, like an LED light bar, like I have in my Tacoma. That way you're not touching any of the factory wiring on the truck. Everything is within the wireless unit itself. Kind of hard to screw that up, and it's really convenient to have that little remote that you can just flip things off and on. Very simple to do. Now, the other option you can take, of course, if you just don't want to do it yourself or you're so afraid of doing mods on the Tacoma yourself, and I'm not knocking you for that, don't get me wrong. Sometimes if you're just not handy, go to a shop. You're going to pay for the labor, of course, but you can still have your Tacoma modded and not have to be afraid or worried about messing it up. Anyway, I just wanted to get on here and talk about that for a minute because periodically I get comments on the channel that folks say they'd like to do something, they'd like to do this or that mod to their Tacoma, but they're afraid to do it and they don't have the skills for it. Start simple and then move up to the more complicated. Build confidence and you'll get where you want to be. Leave a comment, let me know, and be honest. Are there things you'd like to do to your Tacoma yourself, but you're a little bit afraid to do it? I'd be curious to know. Also, real quick, I do have 2 additional channels. Robmotive JT, all about Jeep Gladiators, and Robmotive MT, all about compact trucks. Check them out, and if you're interested, why not subscribe? Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.